The Bicameral Conference Committee has approved a 529.6 billion peso budget for the Department of Public Works and Highways for 2026. The amount reflects 20.7 billion pesos in savings after lawmakers reduced overpriced construction materials using updated cost data submitted by the DPWH. Senate Finance Committee Chair Senator Win Gatchalian said the adjustments made project costs closer to actual market prices, assuring that the final DPWH budget is now free of overpricing. The DPWH budget was significantly reduced from its original proposal amid concerns over overpriced and questionable flood control projects. Let's discuss that further with Batangas 1st District Representative Leandro Leviste. Good morning. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, good morning.
Okay, first of all, this development from the BICAM finally approving the DPWH budget, reducing its budget by 20.7 billion down to 529.6 billion for the DPWH. What are your thoughts on that? Is that enough of a reduction?
Better than nothing, but the price of the road projects in the DPWH budget were actually proposed by the DPWH initially to be reduced by as much as 50% for asphalt projects. And there's a reason for that, because in my own district, I saw that the asphalt projects were in around 100% overpriced compared to the market. And I hope that even the bidding process can achieve these further savings, but I think it was because of a lack of time that a deeper cut was not approved.
Oh, so pwede na ito sa ngayon, tingin mo?
Dapat mas mababa pa, pero dahil kulang ang oras para ibaba ang presyo sa budget, dapat ibaba na lang ang presyo sa bidding. Kasi parang nalilimutan ng taong bayan na yung presyo na ibinibigay sa budget ay dapat yung ceiling lang. Pero sa pribadong sektor, kung ano man yung budget, minsan 10, 20, 30% ipinababa sa bidding. Kaso ang lumalabas sa DPWH ay 1, 2, 3% lang ang ibinababa sa bidding. Kaya kung mag-implementa ng mga reforma sa bidding process at hindi tatanggapin ng DPWH ang mga bids na hindi malaki ang ibinababa, then pwedeng mag-savings pa ang DPWH beyond what was approved in the budget.
Pero Leandro, I do remember having you over here on the show, and you were proposing an across-the-board cut for the DPWH budget by as much as, I guess, 40%, according to the testimonies of the DPWH engineers. Nagulat ka ba nung dun sa last-minute appeal ni Secretary Vince Dizon na ibalik yung budget kasi may mga miscalculation? Or is that something you've also come to realize na was reasonable na hindi ganun kabilis i-apply yung cost reduction na yan?
I believe that Secretary Dizon sincerely wants to lower the prices, but was made to reverse his position based on political realities. And the fact of the DPWH's computations saying that you can have 45 billion pesos in savings is still supported by the DPWH, but they became a bit more cautious in the end also because of a lack of time. But again, it doesn't mean that it cannot be achieved in the bidding process. I would want to note the following. In my district, I submitted a letter to the Committee on Appropriations to implement the lower prices just in my district. So we will be able to show that road projects can indeed be built at 50% the price that the DPWH had initially set.
Before we go to the solution that you're proposing, what do you think were the political realities that pressured Secretary Vince to backtrack on the overall supposed cost reductions?
Officially, the DPWH contractors were saying they will not bid because the price is too low. And as a result, jobs will be lost and the economy will slow. I think we all know that there are big margins on DPWH projects. Only 40% of the contract prices allegedly go into the project. So there's 60% that could foreseeably be cut. But the contractors, if they all band together and say we'll just not bid, and DPWH, if they don't allow new contractors to come in, and will really be able to stop biddings from happening. I would say, however, that given the country's fiscal position, it would not be bad to just cancel some of these DPWH projects compared to proceeding with overpriced projects. This is actually a point that I would like to bring up more in Congress in the coming. The 6.7 trillion peso budget was actually set when we were at 5.5% to 6% GDP growth. And we all know that we're now at 4% and trending downwards in growth. So I think we can safely say that we cannot afford the 6.7 trillion peso 2026 budget. And the country's debt to GDP ratio has been increasing, allegedly to 63% to date, but foreseeably to 64% by the end of the year. It should be hitting 70% by the end of next year or the early part of 2027. So it's, I think, misperception that you need the DPWH budget for economic growth, because you can say we actually need to save more money because we don't have enough revenues to pay for the DPWH budget anymore.
Although government spending is part of the formula in terms of driving the GDP. So kumbaga parang if people get conservative over spending on any government project, right? Because this does not just affect the DPWH budget, it also affects everything. That could possibly be a source of corruption, right? But if we were going to do a rebidding of all the projects, how would you propose that to go? And would it be for all projects?
First, regarding government spending, I would say if only 40% of the contract price goes into the project, then there's no multiplier effect. It's actually a division effect because profit of the contractor isn't circulating into the economy. But the fact also is that the DPWH budget has been increasing over the past years, but GDP growth has been decreasing. So history has shown that it is not contributing to economic growth. The proposal on the rebidding is based on what Secretary Babe Singson did during the Aquino administration, where if bids did not come at 10% below the approved budget for contract, then he simply had them rebid. Again, as I said a while ago, the average that I have seen DPWH projects bid is at 3% below the approved budget for contract, which we know highly improbable if there are many bidders but all happen to be bidding at almost the same price. So the allegation is almost 100% of bids in the DPWH are rigged. And that's why there are kickbacks that can be given, because contractors owe their winning the bid to it being rigged in their favor. And a quick fix beyond the budget is for the DPWH simply to reject insufficiently lower bids.
But are you okay with the same pool of contractors? But just the 10%, at least 10% below approved budget.
Can oversee the projects, and if there are fraudulent acceptances of projects as completed that are not yet completed or are substandard, then they can now see that the ombudsman is serious about filing cases on contractors that do substandard work. The point, however, is that the prices are too high for the country to be able to say that we're really going to get more than 1 peso of growth for every 1 peso of spending in the DPWH budget.
But won't a rebidding of all projects also stall the implementation significantly?
The notion that you have to rush the DPWH projects by a month or two is totally inaccurate, because we're spending taxpayers' money. And if you don't spend it, then it's called savings. It's not like they're coming in for free. If someone wants to donate the budget for the DPWH, then it would be a true statement, but not if it's coming from taxpayers' money.
Okay. Another part of the budget that was contentious is yung social aid. One of which is the MAIFIP program. What are your thoughts on that? 51 billion peso funding approved for the Department of Health. The House initially proposed 49 billion. It was slashed to 29 billion by the Senate. At ibinalik yung 51 billion. If we're talking about putting money where it's supposed to be, and this 50 billions going to the MAIFIP program, what do you think that's an efficient way of spending it?
I agree that the funding should go to PhilHealth and the hospitals directly instead. But I have a different point to make on this, which is the reason why you can incentivize Congress to appropriate a large amount to health is when there is a program like MAIFIP. If there is no political benefit for the funders to do so, then they will not fund health at all. So it's, I think, in some respects, a choice between whether you want to fund MAIFIP or DPWH, not whether you want to fund MAIFIP or PhilHealth.
Kumbaga parang okay na to kasi may budget na, may additional budget naman that will go to people's health.
Kasi kung hindi naman mapakinabangan nito politically, then gagamitin na lang yung budget na yan sana para sa DPWH. Kasi yung funding na ito ay nanggaling sa 255 billion na na-slash mula sa flood control. Yung 255B ng flood control ay inilipat sa PhilHealth para ibalik yung sinabi ng Supreme Court na ibalik para sa IFIP, para sa DepEd. Those much are better than the other uses. But some of the other uses of the 255B were additional AICs to pad a new form of social aid in the DA for farmers and fisher folks that are selected, and the increase in the budget of farm-to-market roads. And I think that it would have been more responsible for us to instead approve the 2026 budget. But what I have come to see in the budget process is that the proponents will try and spend every peso that can be spent. Even the 6.7 trillion budget is not enough to satisfy all of the requests for budget and government. But I think it's going to eventually catch up with us when we run out of money that we can borrow to continue to spend as much as we do.
And with all of those realities, how do you think can we create a budget where people won't have to knock on politicians' doors to beg for these social aid programs and rely on the system instead? Do you think that's feasible in our lifetime, in your future years as a public servant? Posible kaya yun?
I think all these problems will be solved and replaced by a bigger problem in the next few years, which is all of these social aid programs are being funded by debt, and we will not be able to borrow enough money in a few years' time to continue these social aid programs. So there will be no more social aid programs at all when we can no longer borrow enough money.
That would be the bigger problem.
Yes. Again, as I said a while ago, debt to GDP has gone up now to 64% and will reach 70% in a year or a year and a half's time. So I think when that happens, we're already spending around 20% of government revenues on interest payments alone, and we'll be spending 30% of government revenues on interest payments alone in maybe 3 years' time. And this will mean that there will be no fiscal space for DPWH, MAIFIP, AICs, or other forms of pork barrel, which I think will solve the issue that people are raising, but be replaced by an even worse problem.
Although now, isn't it the right time also to put the pressure on the social aid programs to at least be more institutional in nature? Isn't it the right time to do it? Kasi nga, meron ng mga nagpo-push back ng mga legislators, particularly in the Senate. We see them not supporting these patronage pork-laden programs. Your thoughts on that?
Again, as I'm pointing out, this is a temporary scenario because we're still borrow 1.7 trillion pesos a year for our deficit. But if the GDP of the country is growing by only 2 to 4% next year, and it continues this way and spending continues to increase, we won't have much pork barrel that we can afford to spend in 2 or 3 years' time to begin with.
Speaking of more permanent solutions, Leandro, one of the things that was brought up by the president himself and also that he directed Congress to prioritize is an anti-political dynasty bill. You come from a well-known family in Batangas. Do you consider yourself part of a political clan?
I agree with the proposed anti-dynasty political bills and the principle that there should only be a limit in line with the Constitution on how many should be per family in politics. But I actually have a different solution also, which is an anti-politician bill. I would like to also propose in Congress, which is to reduce the number of political positions in the Philippines. Because actually the Philippine Constitution initially set a limit of 250 seats in Congress, and it has been revised by law to now 318. And the Philippine Congress actually has more seats than Congress or parliaments of countries with larger populations than the Philippines. This is why there are 2, 3, or 4 members of Congress from families, because there are so many seats. If we, for example, half the number of seats, then you wouldn't need a husband and a wife to both be in Congress. I hope they would be satisfied with only having one seat.
But the proposal in the bill of Speaker Boji D defines dynasties up to the 4th civil degree. Pero in clusters, ano? So merong national cluster, merong provincial, may municipal, iba pa yung sa barangay level. Do you agree with those definitions? Or do you share the view of other groups that says this will only or might legitimize political dynasties?
I agree with making it stricter because I'm coming from the perspective that we can't afford to have so many seats in Congress to begin with. I can just add one thing. There's a fixed overhead cost to every position created in government. They all have offices and operating expenses. And if we can reduce the overhead cost of positions in government through a very restrictive anti-political dynasty bill, then this would be a very good idea economically. But I would also add that it also should be done for reasons beyond just slashing political dynasties, because there are many other problems with our elected officials. Many of them, of course, are also there for the wrong reasons. So it's not just political dynasties that you should reduce, it's just politicians in general.
Sana nga, no, para hindi na pupunta yung buwis ng taong bayan sa mga politiko lamang. And we should have real representation in government. And speaking of efficient spending of money, the Office of the Vice President got back its original budget proposed, which is 889 million. This was already reduced to 733 million in the House. Pero mukhang ibinalik. Are you for that? Increasing back the budget of the Office of the Vice President?
That's not even half the allocable of one congressman. So I think it's more important to focus on how we can slash the budget based on the allocable numbers of the budgets of congressmen.
So this is reasonable for you?
It's not surprising in Philippine government. The personnel services for the whole government might be 2 trillion pesos. And by the way, I think that budget that you cite is mostly personnel services. It's not like it's any capital outlay, or it's very minimal maintenance and operating expenses. And I think there's a call for a right-sizing bill that has never really passed because we create more and more slots in government every year. But if people want to slash the budget of that office, I would say let's slash the budget of all offices.
All right. Mukhang ano, Elon Musk, Donald Trump route. Si Leandro. Right? Okay. Maraming salamat for sharing your time with us this morning and giving your thoughts on the approved budgets at the BICAM. We have Batangas 1st District Representative Leandro Leviste.